we know what the opposition thinks, but even if there was tampering, I mean, even if results were embellished by 20%, these reforms still passed with a strong majority. Do you think there's a failure now to recognize outside Russia just how much this leader is loved by Russians?
No, I don't. And I think that, the 20% figure, I don't know where that's bubbling up from, but you have to take into account that the EU, the US State Department spokespeople have come out today and said they're deeply troubled by allegations of irregularities. I think that you have to understand that voting's been taking place for over a week now. Some of them were tents set up on park benches. There was administrative pressures where factories, teachers, were told by their bosses if they didn't go to vote that they would be fired and that administrative actions would be taken against them. There was a huge push and pressure put out by the Kremlin across the nation to try to get the numbers of people voting at least over 65%, which is basically what I think they ended up at. Imagine in 2018, when Putin was quite popular, he got 77% of the vote. And now he's at 77.9% on a referendum when his popularity has been plunging
Dana, that's
through the
happened,
COVID-19.
That's happened in other countries as well. I mean, remember when President George W. Bush was elected for the second time back in 2004, his popularity ratings were at historic lows. And he was still reelected with a comfortable margin. Actually, more of the popular vote the second time around. That does happen. I just have to question now that,
but we weren't in the polling places. We were not nobody was in the polling places.
I mean, the reason that
reporters were physically assaulted and pushed out of them. So it's not an argument, but the point is that nobody was allowed to monitor that election. And there are all sorts of allegations from the opposition, incredible people, that it was a sham. And I think we have to take that into account.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, there were also on this referendum a number of social issues. Constitutionally banning homosexual marriage, for example, ending the separation of church and state. This is what have led some to say that he used these issues to really appeal to Russia's social conservative nature, perhaps masking the term limits issue, but legitimately win these reforms because Russians are socially conservative in a way that they want to see preserved in their constitution. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think the people that support Putin are socially conservative because a lot of his support comes from that old Soviet bloc, people over 55 years old. So they are certainly socially conservative. And the Russian Orthodox Church, by the way, has come out against same-sex marriages, and very strongly so. And so has Putin. He's blamed same-sex issues on a decrease in the population of Russia. But I mean, I lived in Moscow, and I can tell you that Moscow is much more liberal on these issues. But you're not going to see it on television, and you're certainly not going to hear that voice within the Russian Orthodox Church. So, but Andrea, you made a very important point, and that is that a lot of the referendum did the Putin's appearances and what was talked about on television didn't talk about the fact that this was going to extend his term to 2036. They focused on things like increased pensions and tying salaries to the rate of inflation. So yeah, a lot of people thought that was a good thing. But the talk about Putin extending through to 2036, there's a lot of Russians that don't support that.
Okay. You know, these are constitutional reforms. They have now been passed and approved by all necessary bodies. Is there any going back after this?
Well, likely not. But, Prime Minister Mikhail Kasyanov told me the other day that he thinks there's going to be unrest, that the financial support that the Kremlin has issued during COVID-19 is not forthcoming, and there's going to be a lot of desperate people in the fall. And that's why this referendum was compressed and pushed through in the middle of a pandemic, because they're worried about street unrest in the fall. So who knows what can happen in the future. But right now, certainly President Putin is in a safe place, and nothing immediately is going to happen to turn any of this back, including, by the way, territorial concessions inside Russia, which includes the Crimea. That was also put in that referendum.
Dana Lewis joining us live there from London. Thanks so much for being with us.